So I hope your brainstorming is going well. Anyway, to kick off, the first table have kindly volunteered Mark Kellett from Magnet Networks, who has come up with their first idea. So, Mark, let's hear what you have to say.
You can hear me? Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Just a brief little background as to why am I standing here, what's the relevance of Magnet Networks. One of the critical things about Dublin, Belfast is, and Ireland's opportunity as a digital hub, is the transatlantic fibre connections. So my business, we manage the fibre that comes in from New York, so lower Manhattan, and all of the fibre that comes into Ireland, the two direct links, land in Dublin, one actually lands in Coleraine. That fibre runs from in Dublin City up in Coolock. We carry all of the traffic for all the big internet companies. So anytime you're doing a Google search, as it happens, it comes through our building, so be careful what you type in those searches, we're watching you. But on a practical level, when we talk about the physical manifestation of moving people off roads onto rail and looking at Dublin, Belfast, that fibre optic link actually also goes up to Belfast on the train track. And one of the discussions we've had with Irish Rail is, it's great getting people off the roads onto rail, but how productive are you when you're on the train? And I spend time going to meet customers in Cork or Galway or Belfast, and we are going to be announcing shortly investment into Belfast, into Northern Ireland. So when I'm up and down, I want to be productive on the train. Well, what about making that train journey very productive in terms of the Wi-Fi capability on the train? So when I lived in the Valley for a number of years, from San Francisco down to San Jose, the buses we were on, and that's when I worked for Yahoo, had great Wi-Fi, so we could work while we were on the buses. So if you're on the train, the same thing, Martin's going to get the train up to Belfast to the Intel office. Do you want to be spending an hour and a half of wasted time in a car, or when you're on the train, do you want to be able to do teleconference, do you want to be able to video conference, Skype, do you want to be able to work? And it's technologically possible to take what we do across the Atlantic, which is having repeaters on the seabed, boosting the signal. The same concept is boosting the signal onto the trains along the train track between Dublin and Belfast. So it is productive time on a train as opposed to lost time on a train. And that was really something you can model not only from a Dublin-Belfast scenario, you can do it to Galway, Cork, but it's something that you take internationally. And so when we talk about the Internet of Things, how is that Internet of Things going to be connected and enabled? And that's just an idea, which is, if it's truly an economic corridor, it's a data corridor. Think of it not just about the physical movement, because trains, planes, automobiles are about the physical movement of people. What we do in our business is the virtual movement of facts, figures, and data. So why not make that time on that train journey as productive as possible by effectively boosting the capabilities? That's it.
Great. Okay. Fantastic. I think we've got a few words as well from Brian from Dublin City University.
Thank you, David. I'm just here this morning delighted to announce that Dublin City University and the University of Ulster will shortly, that's within a number of weeks, sign a major cross-border strategic partnership, focusing primarily on innovation. Both universities are committed to engagement with enterprise and committed to entrepreneurialism in the universities themselves. We've been working together for a number of years, but decided that this year was the appropriate year to upscale this whole focus on the region itself. Both universities have a commitment to the Eastern Corridor that will have 4 million people living on it before 2030. We both collaborate right across the border, and with Dundalk IT in the middle of that as well. The major elements of this will be collaborative research projects, new degree programs, a focus on enterprise, innovation activities along the corridor itself, and also commitment to mobility of students and staff, joint academic appointments. So really there's a backdrop of advancing peace on the island as well. So later on today, my counterpart in the University of Ulster will join the Lord Mayor of Belfast in Belfast. So Richard Barnett will be making the equivalent statement, and then within a number of weeks we'll sign the public statement on this. So we're delighted with this initiative between the Lord Mayors, and certainly the two universities will play a major part in delivering innovation, jobs and economic development along the region itself. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think the first table has set the bar fairly high. Do we have anybody to volunteer to be the second table that's going to throw forward a few ideas? If you don't volunteer, I'll volunteer you. It's no problem. Okay, great. Oisin, your table. Okay, do we have someone from this table here? We do? Okay, excellent.
Good morning, thank you. Compulsory volunteer. We had a couple of quick ideas around this table, but we looked a lot, taking some of the leads from the speakers earlier on. We took some ideas from what would work well on the corridor. And I suppose there was two themes coming through: a kind of a greenway that would run from Belfast to Dublin, that would look at the tourism side. I know we're looking at the technology here this morning, but we drift into tourism as well. But we picked up the efficiency piece from some of the earlier speakers, and we believe there's a lot of efficiencies around looking at technology and see can we reduce the fuel burn on that corridor. We are talking about it being an economic corridor, about people moving between the two cities, but certainly I suppose a vested interest being from Irish Rail, but we burn a lot of diesel on that corridor. There's a lot of petrol burnt on the roads. So what kind of technology can we use to reduce fuel, maybe to electrify the route from a rail perspective, which would be much more efficient, would be a lot cheaper to run, and would be a lot more environmentally friendly than the fuels we currently burn. We also had an idea around reducing fuel loss through insulation, and looking at buildings right across, how much more insulation we can do, and how much of that loss that was referred to earlier we can prevent. There were just three ideas that came from the table in the few minutes you gave us, David.
That's a very interesting idea you have there about electrifying the route. But obviously, when you do something like that, there's going to be an awful lot of capital expenditure involved, and you need a certain amount of revenue in order to justify the expenditure. So what's the kind of maths behind that? How much money do you need coming in order to make the investment?
I suppose that becomes part of the business case. You did only give us 5 or 6 minutes. We didn't get into working out the maths and a full business case. But right across Europe, we're seeing some of the big projects in our nearest neighbour in the UK are about electrifying corridors and electrifying transport corridors. Right across Europe, electrification has been the way to go for mass transit. It's a bigger version of our own Luas here in the city. It pays back. It's a long-term infrastructure investment, but it does allow you move a lot more people, a lot more efficiently.
Okay, great. We're just going to move on to the next table behind you. Maybe you might just, Alan, pass over the microphone there to their spokesperson. Maybe you might introduce yourself.
Right, hi, I'm Mark Montgomery. I'm with PwC. We had a couple of ideas which come from a couple of different areas. First one is picks up on Sean's point about not seeing each other as competitors, and that's to call for a joint inward investment strategy between the IDA and the equivalent agency in the north, so that we're not competing for inward investors, that we're seeing the island of Ireland as a destination for investors, competing against other European countries rather than against each other. And secondly was a pet peeve about the phone network disconnecting between the north and south when you cross the border, and so looking at how perhaps a cell phone repeater could be put on the train to allow network continuity between for the length of the train journey, so that there's no disconnection along the way, and picking up on the earlier point about making that time spent on the train productive the whole way.
Okay, great. Two very good ideas there. Thanks very much for that. I'm just going to turn to our panel for a second just to get their thoughts on that. And maybe, Lane, if I could just start with you. It's interesting when you go to the different tables and you hear the ideas, quite a few of them relate to the train.
Well, I guess some people are going to be on the train, so it's top of mind at the moment. But I suppose the train is an important connector between the two cities. And I take the point completely about making sure that time is productive. I would go even further maybe and think about how the train could be redesigned, perhaps, or carriages in the train could be redesigned to enhance working or meetings on the train, that you could redesign the layout of some of the carriages. As you're going to actually, you'll be putting this into practice very soon, but how you could have meetings or different types of working arrangements on the train as well, maybe.
Okay, could I just actually go to you, Martin, on another point that was raised there, which is a really interesting point by the gentleman from PwC, the idea that at the moment we have the IDA competing for projects in the Republic, but in the North, obviously, they want projects as well, and this notion that Sean raised of actually not seeing everyone as competitors, but That's an interesting idea, but you can see why there may be some tricky hurdles there too. What do you think?
Yeah, actually, I thought Sean's intervention was absolutely fantastic. But as I heard the point being made about IDA and Invest and I are world class, and what I was thinking, my gosh, could we ask Man United, Man City to work together? So, that's the practice. I think there is an opportunity, but that is a difficult one. I thought the idea, building again on the internet and the electrification. When we were talking about the electrification of the route, I actually think the opportunity is not just the trains, but it's cars. Our joint lab with SAP in Belfast at Queen's, the Titanic Quarter, they came up with some very interesting statistics that using the internet concept and renewable energy, we could at least introduce 100,000 cars, electric vehicles, onto the island of Ireland without any increase in energy generation, and that could go up to 250,000. And the idea, in Ireland we actually have a closed grid. We could do something remarkable together around sort of electric vehicle introduction. And coming back to the business case, you asked, we've completed a recent pilot with ESB Networks in Clonskee here in Dublin, and using the internet concept, each consumer saved on average about 44% in their charging costs. So there's actually a very compelling business case to actually adopt this, not just from a sustainability standpoint.
Okay, Sean, your idea of not looking at people as competitors seems to have inspired some interesting ideas.
Well, if I can come back to, I think you posed the question about the capital investment to realise some of these savings. But again, it's the way I suppose that we think in our group. And Brian will, I think, confirm what I'm going to say. We jointly worked with on a project called Greenway, and that was a topic that was mentioned earlier, out in North County Dublin. And the grouping was Dublin City Council, Fingal County Council, DIT, Dublin Breen's University, and Dublin Airport Authority. And I remember the first meeting that I had with Breen and his counterparts in our office, in our boardroom. I said, don't talk about the cost of this, because if we do, we'll get nowhere. Leave that to get resolved. Let's talk through about the possibility and the concept. And that would have been in May, I think, 2012, and by December 2013, we had delivered jointly a project in North County Dublin. And that is, in fact, effectively the genesis of what internet is today. And where internet is leading is, and this is how you also address the capital investment to realise some of these inefficiencies. It's the value that we, as partners in all of this, are going to unlock for the electricity industry. So the savings we're going to make in the system from the point of view of eliminating waste. How do you convert that saving into subsidising the technology? So that's what I mean by it's a very, very holistic approach. And again, going back to the competitor issue, France is a very, very interesting policy. No two French public or state-owned companies can compete at auction for the same investment.
Are they allowed to sue each other because they are in this country?
I don't know, but certainly from the point of view of competitor. But I think the theme that I want to talk about as well is that there, even taking away from IDA and its counterpart in Northern Ireland, there are areas where there are opportunities. We're not even on the pitch as competitors. So it is finding the pitch and making sure that we walk onto that pitch, not as competitors, but as partners.
Okay, great. Alan, we're going to move to this table here.
Thanks very much. Niall Gibbons from Tourism Ireland. Three ideas. One, we were struck by the comment on the smart card that was mentioned earlier on, and someone mentioned, well, why not a credit card? And I thought, in the current climate particularly, collectively the Irish banks should be asked to issue an Ireland credit card. Okay? From a tourism perspective, it could be a fantastic marketing tool to the 70 million people who claim Irish extraction around the world. We saw the success of that marketing campaign last year. We could talk to the various providers in the industry, in accommodation, attractions, activities, events, to top up that card that hits the value agenda on the head. There should be no currency handling fee across the border for people who travel to Ireland on that card. And effectively, this becomes your ticket to Ireland. I think it's a very simple idea, and it's something that does integrated ticketing. It also is a boost for our own industry, and it's an export. That's number one. Secondly, it's an easy one to say, it's a complex one to solve. But it's amazing that you can travel around the Schengen region, 25 countries in Europe on one visa. It costs about €80. And to come on this island to travel around it, you need 2. Now, I know there is a resolution on the way, but practically there are going to be 28 flights a week coming from the Middle East into Dublin from September with Etihad and Emirates. But in our conversations with Etihad and Emirates Holidays, they don't feature Belfast in their brochure because most of these people are coming in on Irish visas. So a major opportunity for Belfast when a combined UK and Ireland visa is in place, an easy win. The third idea is, it's difficult to articulate. We obviously market the island of Ireland abroad. We see all these challenges and opportunities as Sean described them. And we talk about the economic corridor today, but we need to start creating an emotional corridor. And in all the great ideas that are here today, and we've found this over the last 12 years in Tourism Ireland, there is an amazing emotional barrier in terms of people from the Republic of Ireland, particularly in Dublin. There are about 2 million people down here that have never been to Belfast. And that mindset has to change. And this is a great forum to start that conversation. So I use the term, we need to create an emotional corridor. There was a great idea of a greenway mentioned over there. I'm sure there are other ideas, but we have to start changing mindsets and perceptions, particularly down here. And it has to happen on the other side too. But we see this daily in our job, but that emotional corridor is really important in transforming relationships.
Okay, great. 3 good ideas there. We're going to go to the table behind you and Thomas Cooney from DIT.
Thanks, David. So Tom Cooney, DIT, Professor of Entrepreneurship, resident of County Louth, so I have a number of interests here. Can I also just make a plug? DIT hosts the World Entrepreneurship Conference this June, and it's on entrepreneurship and sustainability. You can get your tickets at icsb2014.org. icsb2014.org, in case you didn't get that. As a resident of County Louth, and coming up on the last point, I go to Belfast quite a bit. I've got 2 small kids, and if I could have anything, is there any chance, Mayor, that we could have W5 in Dublin every so often? Because that Children's Science Museum is one of the best museums that I've been anywhere, and my kids absolutely love it, and we're regular visitors to it in Belfast. We threw out a lot of different ideas, but we came up with one that we thought could be implementable immediately. One of our thoughts was around a book by Brad Feld called Building Startup Communities. And in that book, it's an American book, he talks about if you're building startup communities, it's got to start with entrepreneurs. They have got to be the leaders. And that government, either local or national, universities, schools, all of those people are feeders into the system rather than leaders of it. And one of the ideas in that book was the notion of entrepreneurs having office hours. So successful entrepreneurs would offer 1 or 2 hours per week where they make themselves available for people to phone them or for people to meet them, where they can offer mentoring or guidance. Very simple idea, and I know Sean O'Sullivan in Cork, he already does this. Is there a way that we could just build a very simple website where people could log in, make this offer available, and then other people could log in to kind of register to become a mentee, or just I know with Sean, what he does is just people want him as a sounding board. So a 10-minute conversation, sounding board. But the twist on this we're going to suggest is that you get hooked up with somebody from the other region. So if you're south of the border, you get linked up with someone north of the border and vice versa. And in that way, it helps to break down the emotional barriers that was being discussed at the previous table. Equally, the BICs and the other business innovation centres and the co-working spaces that are available on all the locations across that corridor, maybe they could make themselves available in terms of offering space. So if you're going to Dublin for a meeting or Belfast for a meeting, could you spend a day in a co-working space without any charge, or maybe to get to meet people? We tried to create something that was simple and implementable at a very early stage.
Great, Thomas. Thanks very much. Let's move on to the next table just beside you there. Great.
Hi, Nick Wheeler from All in One. We came up with 3 ideas. The first, well, perhaps the third, but similar to a previous speaker, the upgrading of the internet capability on the trains, being able to work whilst you're travelling, was an obvious win. The second was twinning of companies, so extrapolating on Sean's idea, getting companies that aren't in competition or don't see themselves in competition, driving innovation between larger R&D groups between the two of them. And thirdly was the use of interns cross-border. As a company, we've had a couple of interns regularly from Taller IT and various other sources, and they've been very good in terms of driving innovation. They're learning at the coalface. They've got the newest thinking, and we thought if we were able to push interns from the north down to the south and the south up to the north, you're building relationships. I mean, again, some of the key wins there. You're integrating the communities. You're building relationships that will last hopefully a lifetime at the right time for the businesses. You're building a tourism understanding. I heard that so many people haven't travelled between the jurisdictions, and this would help that. And you're also removing the emotional barrier, which was also mentioned. So, the youth of the future, if we can build those relationships very early on in the work career, it should last for a long time and drive what we're looking to achieve. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Mick. Okay, well, because we're against time, we're going to take the next 1, 2, 3, 4 tables, and then we're going to revert back to the panel for their thoughts. So we might just go to the table over there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Barry Sheen from DIT. There's a large amount of cross-border bodies, and there's bodies on either side. And our idea was simply to map the bodies, so find out all the different ones, social, political, cultural, economic, etc. Map them, align them, and link them. So try and get some link between each one to make things easier, because there's lots of people doing different things. One interesting idea was to get buy-in from Cork. And the simple thing is that if you're creating an eastern corridor, can you actually get buy-in from the rest of Ireland who would actually buy into that idea? So that it's not just Dublin and Belfast, but that other people who could otherwise perhaps spoil it or go against some ideas actually look at thinking this is a good idea. So that was us.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Shirley McKay, British Embassy. The 2 ideas that were discussed at this table centred around energy and talent. First of all, the table believed that the focus could be and should be on renewables and making the corridor a cluster where companies choose to locate, develop and collaborate. We particularly discussed the single electricity market and the progress that has been made there, but that there's further scope, of course, for all sorts of other energy collaboration. We identified that there is collaboration already on wind, but there's greater scope for solar power, and that to be a particular new and unique activity for the cluster to take part in along the corridor. And overall, we believe that smart metering should be a focus, and that we could energise the Belfast-Dublin corridor to be a first geographical area to lead in this sector. We're also conscious of the need to attract and locate data centres along the eastern corridor. And as they are large energy users, we felt that would be compatible with building a corridor renewables cluster. And then secondly, we focused on talent, which is something that everyone, of course, has been championing for many a year. There already is still an IT, computer science shortage in terms of graduates, and indeed sales development skills. And we welcome the collaboration between DCU and the University of Ulster and encourage many more educational establishments to continue. But we also wanted to urge a word of caution that there is often a mismatch of the graduates that are turning out and the skills of the industry sectors. And being mindful of our proposal that renewables should form a cluster along the corridor, we are asking the academic and college institutions to be conscious of the skills to help us build a renewable sector. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Shirley. There's plenty there to think about. Hi.
Hi, Ali Graham, Dublin City Architect. We had lots of ideas, but I'm just going to condense them into one. that along the Dublin-Belfast corridor, there are the best designed homes in Ireland. And by that we mean that they're the highest quality in terms of an innovative interpretation of density, that they have very high space standards, very high construction standards, energy use standards, but also that they're the best connected homes in Ireland. And we don't just mean in terms of broadband, but that's very important. We mean in terms of durability, livability, that elderly people can, they're the homes that elderly people can live most comfortably for the longest, and that they're the best connected in terms of transport. So we'd like to develop a strategy for the Dublin-Belfast corridor which identifies the opportunities for doing that, and it would apply to new homes as well as existing homes. And we'd also like to draw in the tourism sector. We'll extend the concept of home to include hotels.
Ali, thanks very much for that. So I think the only table that we're left to do is this table here. Do you guys have a spokesman? You do.
Brian Motherway from the Sustainable Energy Authority. Our idea is make Dublin-Belfast the world's first really serious corridor for electric vehicles, which Martin alluded to. Put the charging infrastructure, put the data in place, make both cities create incentives, get the hotels involved, get the towns along the way involved, make it really easy to drive at any point around the two cities and between the two cities in electric vehicles. A lot of very direct energy and environmental benefits and cost savings to the users, but also could be bring an international focus, because it would be, really could be the first in the world to allow companies, from the car companies to the data companies, the ICT people, to come and show what electric vehicles and the associated infrastructure can do. Thank you.
Terrific. Okay, I think we've got all the tables and we've got a really amazing broad range of ideas, which is fantastic. So I'm just going to go back to our panel. I might start with you, Sean. We've heard a lot there, everything from electric cars, a lot on rail, a lot on the internet, a lot on energy. What are your reflections on what you've heard?
I love the idea of a corridor, as simple as that, just like rather than trying to do 1,000 things, to do one thing. I think it's a great idea. I love the idea of the credit card, Niall. I actually spoke to somebody about this about a year and a half ago around the whole Global Irish Economic Forum, and it was around the diaspora card. So I think there's an area there that could really, really be developed. I think it's a great idea. I'll see what I can do on Cork, by the way, and try and get them on board. But the important thing is, and I saw the agenda for today, it is to come up with, distill it down, because you can't do everything, whether it's in business or at national level. Trying to do everything at the one time is impossible. So try and focus on the 4 to 6 key tangibles that can be delivered out of this. And then that can go back to my opportunity, a phone call from Martin Curley that I would never have expected in 2008. If you do a few things well, then the tentacles will build out of there.
Lane.
What a fantastic collection of ideas, really covering social, physical and environmental aims. I think the point that was made about the emotional connection is really important. And I would say that whatever ends up being developed, I think that potential of the project to enhance emotional connections between Dublin and Belfast and the corridor itself and create that sense of identity should really be lifted. I love the design idea as well, around really lifting the sort of physical fabric between the two cities, but also thinking of it in a holistic way. And I completely agree about doing some things, a small number of things really well. But I would also add that perhaps you also need to be alive to the potential connections between those projects. So if you do a physical project, think about the connectivity in terms of not only broadband but also the sort of transport connections and transport around electric vehicles and the grid, because all these things are connected, and that's what makes cities so interesting, is that there are all these different integration points and connections between all of them. So but yeah, no, really fantastic, and I'll be really excited to see what happens after this.
Martin.
I think the idea actually of a shared vision, I think Brian actually came up with a vision that actually people could buy into. I think everybody knows the story of the NASA janitor when he was asked what his job was. Well, I'm not cleaning toilets, I'm putting a man on the moon. I think if we had a vision, I think it would spawn many, many projects. And just to tie it back to Sean's comments around collaboration and synergy, in the 20th century, most of the wealth creation and actually advances in quality of life came from electrification. In the early 21st century, the big benefits or advances, wealth creation are coming from the flow of knowledge rather than the flow of electrons, but it's also driving improved quality of life. But we have the opportunity, if we embrace this internet concept, so we get the benefits of electrification and knowledgeification happening together, and 1 and 1 could make 100. So we get the energy efficiency, we get the cost savings for consumers, but we also build this formidable ecosystem, so we can use Ireland or this corridor as a reference site and sell lots more quantum heaters, lots more Intel chips, and a lot of consulting services around the world. So I think that's an opportunity, and of course the universities are a key part of that quadruple helix.